scheduled to go to the polls today. The Secretary General of the UN, Ban Ki-moon, said the elections are likely to worsen the situation. Syria has had ongoing civil war for the past 3 years now. Over 150,000 people have been killed and millions have been misplaced. To tell us more, we are joined in studio now by independent analyst Tom Wheeler. Tom, welcome. Good to have you on the program. I read 150,000 people, but I've heard larger numbers than that being bandied about.
Yes, well, nobody really knows because, you know, people are bombed in their homes and so on. So where do their remains go? You really don't know.
Yeah.
But the number of people who are displaced and the people who have fled the country is just horrendous. I mean, that place is in a total state of destruction.
Let's go back to the beginning. What's happening? What is at the root of all of it?
Well, I think originally it was the question of the Arab Spring. Syria was the last country to be affected by that sort of trend towards democracy, which of course hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And eventually the forces against al-Assad were overtaken. I mean, they were winning it to an extent, but then an extremist group, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, came on the scene, and there are now 3 sides to this fight, and the Syrian government have absolutely no compunction in shooting up the country to keep the opponents at bay.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about President Bashar al-Assad, it appears, and perhaps we're wrong, but you can give us a bit of clarity, it appears that he is trying to hold on to power at the expense of his people. At any cost, he is going to remain in power. Is this what's
I think
happening?
That's a fair summing up, yes. His father was the president before him, and between them they've ruled that country for 40 years. Now, it's a sort of a secular government headed by a man from a Shia sect, which is the religious version of Islam from Iran, and the Iranians are very much supportive of him.
Yeah.
But the majority population are Sunni, and then various other Christian and other religions in that country, very diverse country.
What are the chances of him remaining in power?
Well, if it depends on that election, I don't think there's any doubt. There are 2 candidates other than him, but they're almost, almost irrelevant. I think they're just there to give some sort of credibility to the election.
Yeah. So it's a foregone conclusion almost.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that.
Yeah. Which is not good for the country because they're not happy with the way things are now. So what's going to change after the elections?
Yeah. Well, Assad is becoming more desirable, should we say, as a leader with this attack from the Al-Qaeda orientated ISIS group. You know, he's the lesser of the 3 evils, should we say, that he's more likely to, keep the country on a kind of a secular basis, should we say that, rather than having an extreme Islamist government take over there and create another Afghanistan or something of that sort.
Well, I mean, the comments coming from the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, as I said in the introduction, saying that these general elections are actually going to worsen the situation.
Yeah,
Why?
Well,
why do you think?
Because it's not real. It looks as though there's democracy. This is the first time there's been any sort of an election where more parties than one are involved in those 40 years. You had an authoritarian government which is now trying to look like a democracy. But because the war is ongoing, because the Syrian army planes are still bombing areas outside Damascus, Damascus itself, the center where Bashar al-Assad lives, and where I think that South Africa has an embassy. I haven't seen that they've been withdrawn from there. The center of Damascus is still in control of the Syrian government, but the outer perimeter is being controlled by various rebel factions, and bombing and bombardment is still taking place in those areas. So, and then cities like Aleppo, you know, I visited Aleppo some years ago and Damascus, and I can't believe that a place like that could be so totally destroyed. This is a World Heritage Site, and by this war over the last 3 years, those cities are just being wiped out.
Yeah. You know, which brings us into question of the future of Syria. I mean, you say that these cities are basically wiped out. I mean, you also mentioned in Time magazine they've got photographs that we can have a look at and see what this country has been reduced to now.
Yes.
But how do you rebuild a country like this?
Well, you've got to stop the war to start with, but I think the UN, one of the UN agencies, has said it's going to take 30 years to rebuild Syria to what it was before this all started, provided they grow at a rate of 5% a year. Now, we know how hard it is to do that in this country. So that country is going to take decades to get back to where it was before this all started.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, so many countries have been intervening since 2011, and it just doesn't seem to have been helping. Talk us about the foreign intervention and what went wrong.
Well, the original foreign intervention came from the Iranians in support of al-Assad with Hezbollah in Lebanon, which they're essentially the same thing. They're partners because they're Sunnis. Then the Russians have been supporting al-Assad. The Russians have prevented any action in the UN Security Council with the assistance of China, but using their veto. The Americans pulled back. They decided they were not going to get involved, I think mainly because the US Congress and the American people didn't want to be involved in yet another war. Turkey's on the northern border. It has a concern. It's an open border, and refugees cross, but also people who are getting engaged in the fight also cross that border. So, you know, it involves everybody. It involves Jordan, where a lot of the refugees are gone. It involves Israel, which has a common border on the Golan Heights with Syria, and where people are crossing over. And so it becomes an all-out war and an all-out destruction of the whole region.
Well, thank you for talking to us, educating us on the region that is going to the elections or to the polls now. This, of course, is happening today, and one is going to be watching that, I imagine, very, very closely. But the United Nations saying that this is, in fact, going to make the situation worse, having an election at a time like this. Tom Wheeler, independent analyst, thank you for joining us.
It's been a great pleasure.
All right. Are we taking a break?